Hey, Amy.
Hi, Megan. It's good to see you live.
Oh my goodness. Hi to everyone who's joining us. Amy, we have we have quite a few things to discuss tonight. I think one of the reasons we decided to do a live was because we've had a lot of questions about what's going on in the true crime world. And while we both know there's always something going on in
Mhm.
the true crime world, and so do our listeners and probably everyone else, I feel like this is one of the most, I mean, dare say it, like prolific times with how many really big things are actually happening at the same exact time and
And
over.
I don't think it's gonna slow down. I think
And
it's
for
gonna
these
ramp up.
elastic anti-wrinkle pants to a summer.
Sorry, I thought I heard something. Yep. Is it gonna slow down? No, no.
No, I think, like, I'm gearing up for a crazy summer. I don't know about you, but
Yeah, no. But you know what? What really sucks is, as you know, the trials
Mhm,
don't happen in the summer. That's why they're happening now, because
mhm.
everyone wants to wrap it up before, pretty much before like the end of June. And then I know that we're going to talk Kohberger, and I know his trial starts in August. That's rare too, but it'll
Yeah,
go into the fall.
but
So
there's so many pretrial things happening between
yeah.
that, like, they're gonna be very busy in that courtroom. No one's taking vacation, I don't think, in the Kohberger courtroom.
No, probably not in that case.
Mm-mm.
So we're gonna be talking tonight. Gosh, we're gonna talk about Menendez news. We're gonna talk about Brian Kohberger, Karen Reed, and you're gonna end with some Diddy updates.
Yeah.
And there's plenty.
Mhm.
I don't even know. Are you doing Sean Combs? Are we calling him Diddy? We're just going with Diddy.
I guess we'll go with Diddy. Is now a good time to let me tell my quick little story before we get into serious stuff?
Okay.
Because, we could keep it light at the beginning and then we get into some heavy stuff. So, I was in the car with my daughter and a P. Diddy song came on my playlist and she said, "Mom, you cannot listen to this." And I said, "Okay." And I wanted to get into, my view on separating the art from the artist and how I feel about, still listening to his music, but I just said, "Oh, what do you mean?" Because I was curious what she knew, because obviously it's not for children,
Right.
what's going on in the Diddy case, and she said, "Mom, he's really bad. He killed Michael Jackson."
Where
And
did she hear
and
that?
"Oh," I said, "I don't know if that's true." She's like, "Yep, he had a tunnel, an underground drug tunnel to Michael Jackson's house." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I think
Stop
you may have
it.
gotten some misinformation, but for now, we're just gonna move on." I'd rather that maybe than her know about the sex parties. I
I
don't know.
was gonna say that's probably a better thing that she actually thinks that. Where do you think she heard that from? That's
It's
so
just like
interesting.
middle school rumors. It's
Oh,
just
that's like, what's that game where you play, like, telephone and like
telephone. Yeah.
that? Yeah, I feel like that's better too.
I want it to be like the years don't even match up here, like, he's in trouble now, like, Michael Jackson died so many years ago, but it's okay.
Let's preserve her innocence, so to speak,
Yeah,
on that one, you know?
do it,
All
okay.
right. Okay, so, let me kick us off. We'll start talking about the Menendez brothers.
Do it.
Big week for them. So we also did what did we do something we were talking about it? Oh, no, I was watching when they were supposed to be sentenced
Mhm,
last month and, holding, like, outside, watching, like, the courtroom,
mhm,
everyone's outside waiting, 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 and, they basically put a halt to the hearing last time, and the reason why is because the judge apparently didn't have time to review the parole board, their risk assessment, or I should say, the risk assessment that was done by the forensic psychologist for the parole board. Because the Menendez brothers actually have a parole hearing scheduled for June. I think it's like June 18th, so don't keep, look up the date for yourself, but so they stopped the hearing last time and the judge said, "Look, I'm not gonna sentence these guys, without hearing what their possible risk assessment has to say." Yesterday, or was it yesterday, the day before, 2 days ago, they are resentenced. The judge got the report, which I'll talk about in 1 minute, and the judge resentences them to 50 years, 50 years to life.
mhm,
This is big. Now people might go like, "Oh, but that's still 50 years and they've only served like over 30." But no, no, no.
mhm.
50 years, and because they were sentenced as youth, so, the youthful offender law in California means that because they were under 26 when they committed their crimes, they are parole eligible now based on the new sentence. So, this is huge.
Eligible, eligible is the
Yeah.
operative word.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So they are parole eligible, which means they do go to the parole board now. So, what did this risk assessment say? It's interesting. It came out as assessing them. So, it could assess them as low risk, moderate, high risk. I think in California, they might have a couple different levels, like high risk sex crimes, high risk. I think they categorize them when it gets to high risk. But they came out, both of them, as I understand it, from what's publicly available, as being moderate risk. And some people might go, "Oh, wow, that's not exactly what, we were expecting." Well, so the risk assessment tools that are used, have different factors that gauge someone's risk, and we've talked about this probably before, and even in your classes, static and dynamic factors. So
Mhm.
factors that change and those that don't. So they're going to have similar background factors, similar criminal history, the seriousness of the offense, similar age, similar background. So a lot of those factors are going to be the same. I think some of those factors certainly play into the determination. However, there are the factors that change, and that would be their behavior under supervision. So how they did while incarcerated. So there's like the two sides to this story that you've probably heard. There's one story that is they were model inmates and they've started all these rehab programs and they've been mentors. And all of that is true. So it's not like an either or, but the flip side or the other side is that they've had infractions. So some of the infractions I think early on, and I don't know exactly what they are, but there was a drug infraction. Definitely, I believe one of the infractions I heard was that Lyle was maybe helping other inmates to commit some type of tax fraud or something of this nature. I've heard of other infractions. None of them were serious crimes. I've not heard of fighting. I've not heard of anything beyond that. Maybe a possession of a cell phone. I heard that one. So their behavior factors into this decision that they pose moderate risk. So they get assessed that way. It's kind of interesting. I mean, you have to look at it a couple different ways. Yes, I believe they committed infractions, but we're also talking about prison. Prison equals survival.
Mm.
And all the best inmates, you could tell me what you know, but like all the best inmates that I know, especially like in the lifers group, the ones that we've worked with, their early records were pretty littered with infractions, to be honest.
Yeah, and even some of the later records because
Yeah.
it's not difficult to get an infraction in prison. And the ones you mentioned, yeah, some of them, if we're talking about, fraud and, contraband, that's different. But sometimes it could just be walking out of bounds, and that could be an infraction,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Or being
So,
disrespectful or
and just that's so subjective too, right?
contraband is also like sometimes it's contraband depending on who the CO is, but then another CO doesn't think it's
And
contraband.
also contraband could be an illegal cell phone or contraband could be
Yeah.
an extra Twinkie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, there's
Yeah.
also obviously the parole board will be able to see those different, gradients, but still,
Yeah.
it's also when you look at how infractions are related to future offending, I'm not sure the research is as strong as, we
Right.
think.
So
So
that's the other thing, right? We're using these risk predictions. Even though they've been validated and they've been used for a long time, there's a good body of research that will tell you actuarial instruments like these that have
mhm,
like scoring,
mhm,
and aggregate kind of responses in this way. They're like they can be 50-50 for
mhm,
predictions.
yep,
So I don't know that necessarily survival in prison or doing things to get by in prison, which, if you have a utility, like let's say Lyle's helping people commit tax fraud, and I'm not saying that he did that. I'm not saying that's what
mhm,
it was. I don't know how serious it is, but you might argue he's got a skill, he's got to survive, he's got to help, he's got to make himself useful. That's
yeah,
what you do to get by. It's kind of like
mhm,
people who might join a gang who weren't otherwise gang affiliated, but they need to survive in prison. So
mhm,
that may not be the scenario. It may be something different, but I'm just giving examples here of why it's possible, that these things happen.
mhm,
Needless to say, all right, so they have, moderate risk, so now basically now they go to the parole board. That's gonna take a bit, so they're scheduled for June. It's possible they might get pushed back a little bit now.
I would say it's likely.
Yeah. And then even when they go to the parole board, I don't think you're gonna get an immediate decision either from the parole board. So my estimate, I mean, sorry, and then the parole board has to make a recommendation. This is gonna be a very long process. I assume we're looking at another 6 months here. And I
And
think yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you think all of the publicity around this case is gonna help or hurt their chances at parole?
So here's what I think. I think that the publicity helped them get here because I
Mhm.
think everyone feels like they need to do something, right? There's so much publicity,
Yep.
so many people are in favor, but I don't think anyone wants to be the one who's gonna make the ultimate decision. Like the judge, it's smart. 50 years. Hey, I'm not deciding whether or not
Mm.
to parole you. I'm just saying someone else can decide.
Yep.
The parole
Mhm.
board might say, "Ugh, oh, I don't know," or,
Yep.
not sure. Governor, you should decide. I feel like nobody wants to be the one to pull the proverbial trigger, I guess.
Yep.
And I don't blame them. Parole boards
Mm.
too, like, think about some of the decisions. Like, they make the wrong decision and the consequences for some of these high profile cases.
I mean, I think about Willie Horton.
I was yeah,
That's like
Willie
the
Horton. Oh
poster
my
and because of and we'll talk about Willie Horton maybe one day on the podcast,
yeah.
but, because of that individual who was granted parole and committed a heinous crime,
Mm.
a lot of he ruined it for a lot of people after him that were ready to get out and be law-abiding
Yeah.
because
I
yeah.
I mean, I think about those cases too, like, think about 3 strikes laws, Polly
Mhm.
Klaas, so her offender, Richard Allen Davis, he was paroled early,
Yep.
and even though I struggled to see why the parole board would have paroled him, I wasn't sitting on the parole board, and they make
Yep.
this decision, and it's the wrong
Mhm.
one, and look at the consequences, and, they have to live with that, and the kinda consequences to
Yeah.
their careers, obviously, and their personal lives are
It's human error, right? Because they get it right sometimes, but they're gonna get
yeah,
it wrong sometimes, but
yeah.
unfortunately, the implication of them getting it wrong is a lot greater than other jobs.
A lot greater.
Mhm.
So basically that's where we're at with the Menendez brothers. So I'd say about 6 months. I think people have asked my opinion. I do think they're gonna be released. I think it's gonna take a while, and I think it's gonna be long and painful, but I think through one mechanism, whether it's parole board or whether, Governor Newsom releases them,
Mhm.
I do think they're going to be released ultimately. I see that coming in the next year, if I have to guess, but
Mhm.
then again,
Yeah.
you know,
You never know.
you never know. So
Megan, I have to say how impressed I am with you with time management because 'cause I'm like, "Yeah, take about 15 minutes." It's literally 15 on the dot. I don't know how you did that. I don't think I'm gonna be able to keep to my 15 as well as you.
yes, you
But
You're great.
may I jump into Kohberger?
Yeah, 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 of course.
Okay, so I'm gonna give a very brief background. I'm sure everyone knows this case, but I'm just gonna give, like, the Cliff Notes version. Okay,
Okay.
so Brian Kohberger accused of the 2022 murders of 4 University of Idaho students. Now, this trial is finally scheduled to commence on August 11th of this year, 2025. And this will be at the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho. There was a change of venue. I
Mm.
think we can all understand why this was such a tragic case, very publicized. Jury selection is set to begin on July 30th of 2025. And the trial is expected to last until early November. I'm going to think it might even go much later than that.
So August to November. Wait, so 3 months about.
I think it'll be longer personally.
Okay.
But we'll see. So the first key development, because this case, a lot of people are waiting and waiting because it happened in late 2022. So the
Yeah.
change of venue happened in September of 2024. So that was kind of the first time we saw some movement in this case.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of it, it's interesting. It didn't have to do with just the publicity and the extensive media coverage. There was also the fact that the county courthouse lacked the space and resources to accommodate a trial of this magnitude. Like,
Oh.
for example, local law enforcement was just simply insufficient to ensure the security for the duration of the proceedings. Now, this
Oh,
is going to be a huge, huge trial. Now, some of the evidence against Kohberger that we're aware of, more has come out in the last week, but prosecutors, we've known this for a little while now that there has been DNA evidence found on a knife sheath that was at the crime scene.
right.
There's digital data placing Kohberger at the victim's residence multiple times. The
Right.
security footage showing the white Hyundai Elantra, which matches his vehicle, which was circling the area on the night of the murders. Now, Kohberger's team maintains his innocence. They say that he was out that night driving, stargazing. His legal team is saying that the cell phone data is inconclusive and that he often took nightly drives that put him in that area. Okay, fast forward now to last week's proceedings. Now,
Mm.
I will tell you that there were almost 30 motions filed.
Yeah,
Okay.
the defense, so you're gonna be more on this, but the defense
Yeah.
has filed every motion you can think of.
So I'm going to highlight a few issues just because
Okay,
there are so many, and some of them are really getting in the weeds of the
okay,
legal proceedings. But
okay,
some of them that I think are interesting, or the ones that kind of are top of mind for me, the issue of allowing family members to watch the trial. So the prosecution has said that they may be calling one or more of
oh,
Kohberger's family members to testify. Now,
right,
again, that's the prosecution, not the defense.
okay.
So often you'll see family being called for the defense. Now, there's been a lot of speculation as to what the family might know. Some have speculated that Brian's sister had early on, she allegedly commented that she thought it may be Brian that the police were looking for. Very recently, it's come out that Brian had placed many calls to his father the morning
Yeah,
of the murders.
right.
So I think it's clear that those are the people that will be called. Now, the defense was arguing the importance of familial support in the courtroom
Yeah.
and asked the family to be there and told the judge, we understand what the prosecution's saying, but is it possible to call the family early on in the testimony so that they could attend the remainder of the trial? And the judge agreed with that motion. He said, yes, the family should be there, but
Mm.
he didn't issue an official or formal ruling yet on this particular issue. So he agreed with them informally, but he has yet to formally say how he's going to handle the issue of the family in the courtroom.
Well, it's interesting too because even if the family's called early on, I
Mm.
just covered a case on our podcast where they could be recalled and therefore they're supposed to be out. So I don't know how they get
Yeah.
around that, but the
And,
judge will figure it out.
yeah, and not to get ahead of us, but in the Diddy case, we see similar issues with
Yeah,
some of the
yeah,
individuals in the courtroom who might eventually be called as well.
right.
There was also they spent a lot of time talking about DNA that was found under Maddie, one of the victim's fingernails. Now, the defense asked the judge to block this, to block the word inconclusive. So basically, the DNA found under Maddie's fingernails did not match Brian or any other men who were known to be in the home. So therefore, the defense was saying that if the prosecution said that it was inconclusive, it would give the impression that it could still be Brian's DNA when in fact it's not Brian's DNA. So the state actually agreed, and for them it was a non-issue because they just said it doesn't actually matter because basically they have so much other evidence, and they just said that the person who did this was so completely covered and Maddie had no defensive wounds, so they wouldn't expect there to be DNA under the fingernails of the victim anyway.
I would think this is a win for the state. I don't understand. I know what you're saying. I hear
Mhm.
what you're saying, but I don't
Yeah.
understand why the defense would want to block that. I would think anything that would say, "Oh, it's not conclusive," or
Inconclusive.
"It's not we can't say if it's Brian or someone else." I would think that
But
that would be
well,
good for them.
because for the defense, it would be a win for them in the sense if they were able to say that Brian's DNA was not under Maddie's fingernails. That's very different than saying it's inconclusive whose DNA was under there.
So
So
now there'll
we're
just
talking
be
about
no
semantics.
DNA? So
We're
there's no
talking
DNA.
So they're just excluding that evidence altogether from what I understand.
Okay, alright, I get it.
Okay.
Okay.
So next, recall the house was demolished. The state wants to present a 3D model of the home so the jury can get a visual and map out the events, which I think is a
Yeah,
brilliant idea by the prosecution.
yeah.
Because the idea here is the defense is saying that somebody else did this.
Yeah, right.
That's what they've moved into, which I'll get to in a moment. But a lot of people seem to think, how is it possible that one person killed all four people?
Right,
So
right.
without seeing the house, and once you understand the layout of the house, it makes sense how one person could have done it. So without being able to see that,
You
they're
can't.
saying there's just no way that the jurors will never be able to understand this. So the state so I'm pretty sure they're gonna get this. It's pretty much they describe it as like a dollhouse, and it's gonna be a 3D model of the home, and I think the state wins here because the state will be able to show the jury how it's very possible the way he moved through the house or the way the alleged perpetrator moved through the house.
People are visual, they're, like, gonna want they're gonna like to see this, so it's a
Mhm.
win for the state no matter what, I think.
Something else that caught my attention was the state wants to ban the defense from presenting Brian's alibi unless he plans to testify because they want to be able to cross-examine him about it. So
Well,
that
how would the so it's interesting because how would the defense establish his alibi without
without having him up
I
there.
guess, like, I know there's other ways, but I can't think
Yeah.
of the way you would establish he's
I mean,
stargazing?
I guess it would have to be, maybe talking to, like, the cell
Oh,
phone people where it pings. Is this an area Brian often went to when he stargazed that he told
yeah,
this friend he was? I don't
I
know.
was just gonna say, or can someone attest to this? I've been there with him, like, this is a thing he does, or
Which
yeah,
I don't know. It just seems like they're grasping at straws here. There's
so
a lot of talk around experts testifying about the cell phone data, um, and this got really, really technical, and the only thing I can tell you with this is that the testimony will be limited by the judge as
yeah,
far as what the defense's expert can say about the pings when the cell phone were off. Something else of note is the defense accused the state of hiding evidence. I don't know if you caught this, but it was a pretty strong accusation, and I think it pissed the judge off because when the judge asked, like, "Okay, why, where, how, what do you have for me?" There was 0 proof, and the judge was grilling them saying, you know, what do you you're insinuating that the state's hiding evidence, but you have 0 there's no, material evidence, there's nothing to back this up. So pretty much they got nowhere. They spent a lot of time kinda just arguing back and forth, and it felt like they were going in circles, and I think the judge was pretty angry.
what kind of did they say what kind of evidence, or they just said
No,
it's
no, they just kept it vague. I don't know what they were doing. Um,
I mean, I
yeah,
understand zealously advocating for your client, but that's
yeah.
intense. Okay.
Remember that traffic stop? You can't forget that, the body cam that showed Brian, in the white Elantra. The
Mhm.
defense wants that thrown out because they said it's more prejudicial than probative. Why exactly? I'm having trouble understanding, but that was something else. Okay. Now, the last pretrial hearing was scheduled for today, Thursday, the 15th. And I was waiting. I was like, what's going to happen? Okay. So there is a sweeping gag order that has kept the parties from speaking publicly
Mhm.
because I'm assuming you heard about the Dateline special that came out last Friday.
You know how I'm usually like, I
Yes.
listen to
I'm
every Dateline?
surprised you didn't talk about it.
Because school is over and I haven't been in the car and
Oh,
when
no.
I'm at home, I can't listen to the podcast, so I'm one behind. What happened?
Okay. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say anything's groundbreaking, but they spoke
Okay,
to people that knew Kohberger, a woman who met him at a party, and they exchanged some text messages, people that were attesting to his strange behavior.
okay.
Um, the judge is not happy because information leaked because Dateline
Mhm.
had proprietary information. So after Dateline aired on Friday, the hearing today focused a lot on the importance of the gag order and the judge pretty much saying like, I don't know who leaked the information, but somebody did, and this is not going to work for anyone. Kind
Ooh,
of,
yeah,
shut your
yeah,
mouth and stop
yeah,
talking to people.
yeah.
Um, okay, I'm watching the time because you were so good about it, so I wanna make sure. So what I wanna, move to now is you remember the issue was brought up about whether or not the jury should know that Kohberger, has autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
Now they say this condition will help explain to the jury what might be able to explain to the jury why Brian seems, quote, "odd" as he sits at the defense table.
Yeah.
However, the judge denied the request, saying that it's not relevant unless Kohberger testifies. Um,
Mhm.
and his attorneys have repeatedly said it's unlikely that he's going to take the stand, and I think that's a good move. I don't
Well,
think
I
he
think
should
that's a
take the
good
stand.
move. No, no, no.
I do not think he should take the stand. Now, there was a lot of other information about Amazon purchases and cell phone
Yeah.
pings. Um, but I'm just going through my notes because I'm really trying to get to the thing I want to talk the most about here,
Well,
and that
get to it.
what sorry, go ahead.
Get to it, get to it.
Okay, so you remember the issue of whether or not the death penalty was on the table.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So the defense was trying to take the death penalty off of the table because
Right.
they were saying because of the autism spectrum disorder. And the judge said, nope, death penalty on the table. It's up to the jury to decide if they want to use the autism spectrum disorder as a mitigating factor during the penalty phase, they can do so. But in other words, this is a death penalty case. This is a capital case moving forward. Um,
Were they
so
trying to argue, like, under Atkins v. Virginia? So, Atkins prohibits the death penalty for people who are, I don't know, I don't remember. Do you remember
So
the
I think
exact
Atkins I think
terminology?
Atkins talked about, what they called mental retardation at the time. I
Yes,
don't
and
know, and
language not that we use now, but what the
not
court
our
used. Yeah,
language,
yeah,
nope,
yeah, yeah.
definitely not our language. But I think it's difficult because he has a very high IQ.
Right, but I were they trying in, like, the vein of, I think, in Atkins, like, arguing, well, Atkins allows for,
Yeah,
mm, certain certain classes of people to be,
mhm.
excluded from the death penalty, and even though
Yes.
this is kind of a first of its kind, I wonder if they were trying to move the ball forward there.
I
Regardless,
wouldn't
it didn't
I wouldn't be
prevail.
surprised. I also wouldn't be surprised if there has been landmark cases since that actually deal with autism spectrum disorder. I just did
Huh,
not have enough time to do a deep dive because
of course,
obviously
yeah,
there's so much going on this week,
yeah.
with all of these cases. So there's the next hearing that I'm aware of is scheduled for June 18th, and this has to do with evidence related to a claim of an alternate suspect. So Brian
Yeah,
Kohberger's team is saying there's an alternate suspect, and the judge is pretty much saying you're not gonna waste our time during trial
yep.
with, this runaround. He wants to see evidence of this alternative suspect before the case even continues to move forward. So they have a few weeks to get that together.
Well, they have to
Um,
show it
yeah.
ahead. They have to, just like when I'm gonna jump to Karen Reed in a minute, but same
Mhm.
thing, like, you have to show you can't just throw shit at the wall, you know?
No.
You have to
Um,
show there's a good cause, like, you have to be able to support your
yeah.
claim of another suspect.
Now
I
yeah,
didn't know that. I didn't
yeah.
know they were gonna present. I'm really
So
curious.
the other big thing here, and this I couldn't wait, I called you today to after we got off the phone, I called you right back because when I heard this, I was like, "What?"
One of our
So
16 phone calls today.
the murder trial will be live streamed. That was announced today. There will be cameras pointed at the podium, the counsel stand, the witness stand, and the bench.
Amazing.
Um, there will not be any production of the video stream, meaning there will be no zooming in and zooming out. It's just going to
Yeah, yeah,
be,
yeah.
but jury selection will not, for the privacy and safety of the potential jurors,
Yeah.
that will be obviously private. So again, this trial is set to begin on August 11th. It is set to run Monday through Friday, 8:45 to 3:30, except of course during holidays. Um, Also, the judge agreed. This was a request by the prosecution to shut down the live stream when the surviving roommates are testifying,
Oh, thank goodness.
which I think is a really great idea.
Yeah,
The only other thing on the table that I find interesting is there is still a possible plea deal on the table.
yeah.
The judge said, however, if we don't have this in by late June or early July, then, we're shutting this down. So, in other words, prosecutors aren't required to entertain a plea deal, right? They don't have to, but
No,
they can if they
yeah.
want to, especially now that the death penalty is on the table. That's giving a lot more to work with here. Now, whether Kohberger is actually considering a plea deal, that's unknown. If I had to put my money on it, I would say he's going to trial.
I know, even though, like, with the death penalty on the table, I have to tell you, I know that a lot of jurors might not favor the death penalty
Mhm.
or, are reluctant. It's a really big decision. But I think if ever there was a case for death penalty where they're gonna vote death penalty, this is the one for it, and I hope I would think that that
I
they
mean,
haven't they haven't the defense has not prevailed on a lot of these motions, and,
mhm,
like, a lot of the evidence that they didn't want to come in is coming in. The death penalty's on the table. This is like, if there's a
Kohberger
plea to be
he
had,
should take a plea. He should take a plea. Given
I
the
mean,
mountain of evidence and given that now death is on the table, I mean, I don't think he will given the personality
yeah,
that I've seen that I have seen him exhibit.
right.
I don't think he's someone he wants his day in court. He especially since it's
Yeah,
televised and
yeah.
it's live
No, I
stream,
agree. I
he's
agree.
ready for it. 8:31, not bad, Megan, your
Good
turn.
job! I think, that we're a little OCD about time, like,
I know, I think we
when we
might
said
be, but it's
roughly 15
good.
minutes, I actually was just kinda watching, I'm breezy,
Yeah, no, I think it's important though, because I wanna make sure we have time for
Okay.
everything.
Alright,
And
cool. Thank you. Those are like huge updates, by the way. Thank you. And all right, let's talk some Karen Reed. Oh my gosh, my obsession. It was kind of cool last time to have Collier here talking about it. I did not know how obsessed he was with the case too. So that was fun. So, okay, I have been trying to watch as much as I can. We're now off
Work's
from
getting in the
school.
way.
Work got in
Parenthood.
You know what? Work and parenthood really got in the way. Yeah, you don't know. You were on sabbatical this semester, but I was trying. It was hard, but I did watch a lot. I've done a lot of the recaps.
Mhm.
I watch Vinnie Politan sometimes at night
Mhm.
for the recaps. So, all right, we're in trial 2 with Karen Reed. We covered it on the last live stream. This week I thought was pretty interesting from what I've seen. Couple things. The disgraced trooper, Michael Proctor, who
Mhm.
testified in trial 1, will not be called by the prosecution. Now, for those people who may or may not recall, Proctor was kind of the lead investigator. However, it was discovered that he was sending highly unprofessional and inappropriate messages to multiple people. Oh my gosh, investigators, family members, talking about Karen Reed's personal I don't even know, appearance.
Mm.
I don't like, just highly inappropriate messages, that really tainted, the case and really tainted his testimony. What happened afterward, he was suspended for that. He was called to testify. The cross-examination was not great. He had to read it's really icky hearing the messages read, and I don't have a better word. Like, hearing him read the actual messages that he sent about Karen and her personal
Were they
attributes.
I was gonna say, were they sexualized? Like, I didn't actually read them, so
Yeah, I mean, he talks about, there's some things like, there's mention of a crazy woman, of course, or something like that, but then he's talking about no ass, flat ass, or like, yeah,
mm,
it's gross. I mean, it's
yeah.
not good. Does it mean that it's very similar because I don't have a better comparison to the Mark Furman, case. Does it mean that, his personal feelings or personal things he was saying tainted the actual investigation that he did? That's not something for
Mhm.
me to answer. I do know that the cross was not good. It didn't it's a very bad look, and I think he really jeopardized this case in ways that, could not could not be bigger, and and he was fired afterwards. So he is no longer, a trooper. In this trial, he has not been called. So they have another trooper testifying, another investigator who worked on the case. He's been testifying and doing Proctor's part, basically. He's testifying for him. Now,
Mm.
people asked outside the courthouse, will the defense call Proctor? Because they could call him up there and demolish him again. I
Yeah.
mean,
Can
uh,
and they can call him, right?
oh, yeah, of course, yeah, but, the only thing I saw about that, and please, people, cut me some slack, I could not watch today, but I did see a couple days ago, someone asked Karen Reed that. She often answers. She's, like, part of her defense. They
Mhm.
said, "Are you guys gonna call Proctor?" And she said something like, "To be determined," so still waiting to see if he's going to be called. But interestingly this week also, trying to think how to explain this best. So in the first trial, the insinuation by the defense was that, look, Karen was probably being framed and there's someone else out there. They didn't go as hard as they're going on this trial. In this trial, they are specifically looking at the people at the party, Brian Albert, the homeowner, and Brian Higgins, the ATF agent with whom Karen had like this flirtation that she initiated.
Hmm.
So that was, alluded to in the first trial, certainly, but in this trial, they're way, way leaning harder into this. This Brian Higgins has not testified yet, but there came in some video footage of him the early morning after this party that they went to at this house. They have him going back to the police station, and he's in different clothes and he's walking through the hallways. He's on the phone at like 1:30, between 1:30 and 2 o'clock in the morning.
I mean,
And the
could this
question
have something to do with other nefarious behavior, though?
yes.
Okay.
Or it could be just as he explained. So he, as an ATF agent, he actually has he has vehicles that are stationed there at the local PD, and he's responsible for them. Like in the event of a snowstorm, he's supposed to move the vehicles or do something with it. So there's some semi-reasonable explanation why he might be there, but the surveillance that I saw doesn't capture him moving vehicles. It just captures him like kind of going back in the halls. He's on the phone. You don't know why he's on the phone at
Who's
this
he on the
time.
phone with? Anyone know? Like, did they
So
ever
here no, because if you recall, he got rid of his phone.
Oh, yes.
Ah! So it's like
Okay, okay.
all these people and here's what looks really bad, right? All these people either wiped their phones clean or threw out their phones. Like, they're
But
just gone.
as I said, they could have been doing some shady dealings with extramarital affairs or other crimes, you know, maybe they were trafficking drugs, money, who knows? It doesn't mean that
You
they were
don't know.
involved in a
No.
conspiracy, right?
And on the flip side, like, yes, he did have responsibilities, though it's not responsible to go there at 1:30 in the morning after drinking all evening to move vehicles in a
No.
snowstorm. And that's probably a separate issue. It's possible that he did go there for those reasons. And as I saw someone else point out, another legal commentator, you should remember that, and I remember this as a federal probation officer. Law enforcement do not keep traditional hours. There were times like we were running surveillance 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I was back at the office. I was at 7-Eleven, Dunkin' Donuts, like, all the
Mhm.
places you go. But there are reasons why you might be on the phone at 1:30 in the morning with someone else in law enforcement. You might be, it's not traditional. They're not 9 to 5ers, and there could be alternate explanations. So giving them the benefit of the doubt, we have no idea.
Mhm.
I will say it is very strange that all these phones are gone, and while some commentators said, given the whole case and the grand scheme of things, the jury probably isn't gonna think much of this. I don't know. I don't know because we'll see how much the defense goes into this or how much more they're gonna go into it. So I thought that was a really interesting part of this
Mhm.
week. They've got the medical examiner up there again testifying. So a lot of the things will kind of stay the same in terms of the experts are going to be battling it out. Like, do we
Mhm.
know, the manner of death, the cause of death, things of this nature? And look, it's undetermined because they're not really sure. Yes, he died of hypothermia and some type of blunt force trauma. How that happened, it's still up in the air. So these things are up in the air. Um, there's a couple other things. What am I missing here? I know there's other stuff. Whether or not Karen will testify is still up in the air. I would have to say probably not, but they
No.
are bringing in more of her footage. And I want to reiterate again that I really don't think doing all these interviews and doing documentaries was a good call by her and her attorneys. I just don't see how that really helps her. And it almost like even if she doesn't want to testify, there's almost like a push. Like now you have contradicting statements,
Mhm.
right? By the person.
Better
What
than
do you
cross-examination, actually. The prosecution's better with this situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. But so there's definitely questions about whether or not I don't think that there's any way that she's going to take the stand, but we that remains to be seen. Whether or not they'll call Proctor back is going to be another big part of it. So this is going to be again, we're on day 16 of the trial,
Wow.
and
What
yeah.
are they thinking? How long? I know we don't know for sure, but
No, 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 how long? Let me think. So it started when? So we started in April. I feel like it was supposed to be 2 months. It could or could not be,
maybe in time for summer break, they'll try to finish up.
I mean, they're definitely gonna wrap before, like, 4th of July, and I
Yeah.
I I actually think the last trial might have been a little bit shorter than the
Mhm.
predictions were. I still think I don't know how you're going to get a jury to agree. I regardless of the feasibility, I think the defense, they present reasonable doubt. Whether or
Mhm.
not it's more likely or not that she like, they've got taillights that she's found with, they've got, these they've got these horrible messages that they've
Mm,
played.
yes.
That's the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I just wanna talk about this really quickly, but she had left John, the night of, or the morning, early morning of his death. She had left him somewhere upward of 40 voicemails, like, horrible voicemails, like, yelling, "I hate you. You're vile. You're a pervert. I mean, all the things in the world." Like, this is an angry woman who's had a lot to drink, and the prosecution brought this in to show that she's an angry woman. Like, you could see how she would clearly back her car over him, right?
But the
And
defense this works for the defense too, does it not?
yes, how do you think so? Yes, I think it does.
Because it also if she had killed him, especially knowingly, if she knowingly killed him, why would she would have called him and like, "Baby, where are you? I miss you. I love you." Why would she give them that ammo?
Right. So we've heard all these cases where
Yeah.
people who have actually
Mhm.
committed the crime leave a
Yeah.
message, "Hi, sweetie,
Yeah.
just me. Oh, I'm just
Mhm.
calling to say I might be a little bit late. I miss you. I love you."
Mhm.
Like, usually it's just you don't hear 40 to 50 messages.
But she was also very inebriated, so maybe not thinking
So
clearly.
so not thinking clearly, but also this kind of goes to you and I both said, like, it's a very real possibility
Uh-huh.
that she did this, but she doesn't know she did it, and maybe even, just doesn't realize that she even hit him, which is
That's
still a
where I am.
possibility,
Yep.
and she gets home and she's still pissed off because
Yeah.
she still thinks he's, doing whatever. So, I know that the prosecution kinda brought this out, but I do think I think it favors the defense, because I heard these messages and I went, "This woman is so angry." She went home and she is really pissed off at this guy, and, like, she thinks he's gonna pick up or
Yeah.
something, so
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely doesn't think that yeah, but I'm with you. I've said this kind of from almost from the beginning. I really do believe that she did it, but did not realize she did it and has convinced herself, even in the face of evidence that she may have done it, that she just couldn't have.
I am not sure. I'm
Yeah.
gonna tell you, I'm not sure. I think it's very possible, although I I can't help I do, I see some things on the other I see reasonable doubt, and so when it comes
Yeah.
down to at the end, if I'm sitting on this jury, would I vote for guilty? I don't think so, because I see some doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a
And on
few
that note, I had a sneeze, and
God
I
bless
also
you.
hit
No,
I
there's
also
just a few comments,
Oh,
that
okay.
yeah, that I, forgot to even look at. So someone says Higgins tossed it in a dumpster on a
Yeah.
military base. Okay. Explained the calls a butt dial repeatedly is how he testified. The
Yes.
defense asked for a delay. She thought he was with another girl when he didn't come home. Yes. And she was home
Yes.
alone with his niece, and the niece testified, said he was hit by a plow from the get-go. It's interesting.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
and on that note,
all very
hold on
interesting
hold
points.
on really quickly, our
Yeah.
comments. We have sorry, James is gonna step out for a second, our producer, to attend to our,
Aw.
our crying baby.
May
Anyway,
I go into Diddy while James, attends to Hannah?
any other comments? Because
No, those are the main ones about,
oh, good. I
Karen.
can't so I see comments, but, like, I can't actually see them as well. I think it's flipped for me, so thank you.
Well, because I have it is flipped for you, but I have my screen here and then
Okay,
that okay, so anyway,
perfect.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get into Diddy.
Oh,
So unlike Kohberger's case, this is not televised. Cameras are not allowed in federal courtrooms, and this is a federal case, so therefore there will be no cameras. I'm sure you've seen some of the court drawings; they're very interesting. Have you seen them?
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I've seen, like, all of them.
Okay, so, this trial started on May 12th in Manhattan Federal Court. Megan, you're quite aware of that court, right? That's
Was
the
gonna
exact court you worked for?
I did, yes, I worked for the Southern District, so I've been in those very courtrooms,
Mhm,
been on those steps many a time, so
yeah,
I am very familiar with the district, yes.
and I lived around the corner from there for many, many years, so I too am very familiar, right? Isn't it in downtown Brooklyn?
No, 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 downtown Manhattan.
Oh, downtown Manhattan. I'm thinking of the prison probably.
the prison. He's at
Yes.
the Metropolitan Detention
Yes.
Center, which is in Brooklyn. There is
Yes.
one in Manhattan as well. There's 2 of them, federal holding.
Okay. Anyway, okay.
You're close, you're close.
So I'm gonna call him Diddy just because it's easier. There's no other reason. So he is facing 5 felony charges, including sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation for prostitution, stemming from alleged activities spanning over 2 decades. If convicted, he faces a minimum of 15 and a maximum of life in prison. Now, I want to start by just a little bit of the key allegations, and then we'll get into the testimonies. So, prosecutors assert that he orchestrated a network of coerced sexual encounters, and these are now very infamously known as freak offs. And this would involve women and male sex workers. Now, these events were allegedly recorded and used as leverage to maintain silence, with victims often subjected to physical and emotional abuse. Now, Daniel Phillip, a former, I guess Daniel Phillip was one of the people
He's a
who
sex worker.
Yeah, they used different terminology. They were calling him a male review manager. The terminology is a little off, but basically he was paid to have sex with some of the women. He testified that he was introduced to Diddy and Cassie. Obviously, Cassie Ventura becomes a huge part of this case.
Yeah.
He described multiple incidences where he engaged in sexual acts with Cassie under Diddy's supervision, and that these were often influenced by drugs. He also says he witnessed many times Diddy physically assaulting Cassie during a hotel incident.
Yeah.
There was also that former security guard, Flores, who testified. He was, that video came out, the full 15-minute video of the attack on Cassie
Ugh.
came out. Was that yesterday or today? I think it might have been today, actually.
The
Did
days
you
all
watch
seem
it?
the same. I didn't watch the whole thing. I started to, but I
It's it's horrendous. It's as bad as, the clips came out the first time, but now it's the whole 15-minute video.
right.
Now, on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, Cassie testified. Now, she is 8 months pregnant,
Right.
and she gives really, really brave testimony about her abusive decade-long relationship with Diddy. And in shocking detail, might I add, that it's very hard to listen to. And Diddy's mother, his 80-something-year-old mother, and his children are all
Children
there.
are there.
Yeah, at some point, his children did walk out of the courtroom early during some of the testimony. The defense's position, they're saying that the sexual activities were consensual, and to make matters even worse, that the accusers are motivated by financial gain.
Ugh.
And something that I find very interesting is, if you notice, none of the charges none of the charges are for like the domestic violence.
So I saw that
So
as
yeah,
well, but is that because it's not a federal?
so it's not a federal crime.
Yeah.
However, he could be tried on the state level,
Yeah.
and I would suspect that he's going to be.
That's a
But
strategy, don't you think?
a very interesting strategy by the prosecution, because I'm sorry, by the defense. The defense is saying, "You know what? You're right." Like, but they're saying it was mutually abusive. They're
Yeah.
saying, yes, this guy might have some sexual preferences that other people don't agree with. Yes, he was involved in this domestic violence relationship, but that is not why we're here.
Yeah.
We are here to prove these charges. And I don't think it's a bad strategy, because no matter what, he's
It's
going to be held
their
responsible for
only strategy, though. I mean, like,
there's
really,
nothing else they could do.
but they're doing like what you said. Like, yeah, he's vile, he's gross, he's got 1,000 bottles of baby oil. So what? He's a weird, like,
Yeah,
but
that's what
that
they're
doesn't
saying. Mhm.
make him a trafficker. And I think yeah. Oh, yeah, he might be abusive, but he's
Yeah.
still not guilty of these charges.
Yeah, so during direct examination on Cassie, she was very soft-spoken, very held together. Of course, it was very difficult for her to talk about a lot of the abuse that she suffered, and again, she's over 8 months pregnant. And then cross-examination
Yeah.
started, and people were a little worried about how is this. It's not gonna look good for the prosecution to attack this woman who is very pregnant,
But you
who
mean the
is
defense, the defense.
I'm sorry, the defense, yes.
Yeah.
Everyone said it would not look good if the defense was going to attack her. She's very pregnant. She's clearly a victim.
Mm.
So I think everyone was kind of interested to see how it would go. So it seems like the beginning of the cross-examination by the defense focused on trying to show that the relationship was loving at times. I don't know why they spent so much time on this. Like, so what? A lot of abusive relationships are loving at times, right? So it was interesting. Like, I understand why they were trying to like paint a picture, but as it went on, they started to try to show that, she was a drug user. She was addicted to drugs. Like, I felt like they were a lot of victim blaming, it felt like to me.
Or
Um,
dirtying the victim up. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, I mean, the prosecution is expected, to continue their cross-examination of her tomorrow. And from what I understand, the judge wants it wrapped.
Wait, hold on. You
Um,
said the prosecution is expected to. I know. You
Megan,
mean the defense.
it's my bedtime. Am I ever awake at this
No, I
time?
just want to make sure though.
No,
You
but thank you.
okay? No, you're never awake, and
But
actually,
now
neither am I anymore.
I know, right? But no, thank you very much. And now people are getting a glimpse at what I'm like in the nighttime. I'm not, my mind goes at the nighttime. But yes, I'm
Cinderella turns into a pumpkin at 8:30.
seriously. But yes, I'm sorry. You are correct. It is the defense. So the judge, from what I heard today, the judge is pretty much saying, like, we got to wrap this cross examination of this particular victim. It's going to be wrapped by tomorrow.
Really?
Because he has to allow for the opportunity for a recross.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was thinking about that too.
Yeah.
First of all, I felt so bad because it's not that long ago, again, for me, like a year ago, that I was as pregnant as she was,
Mhm.
right? And I cannot imagine having to sit on a stand and testify about the very worst moments of your life,
Yeah.
like the stress level. I felt bad for her. I think there's exceptions to testimony, and I just don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if she wanted to testify, that's a whole different thing. But I just feel like that's such an undue pressure to put on a woman who's so highly pregnant. I felt that was very.
Oh, they need her. First of all, I think they need her. Second of all, I think she
Yeah.
probably wanted to.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
Also, I think that they also, her being pregnant, it makes the jury more sympathetic to her. So I think it works in their favor.
Extremely.
Also, they wanted to get her on there before she gives birth. So, because a lot of times, so this is the interesting thing. A lot of people said this is their star witness. And then
Yes,
people
I
were
heard
like, you
that.
know what? It might. So some people are like, well, if it's a star witness, they wouldn't put her on first. Well, she's very pregnant. Yes, they would.
Have
But
to.
it also has people talking like, what else do they have up their sleeve? There's been these murmurs of all these other famous people that are involved that perhaps she's not the star witness. Perhaps there's going to be a bombshell. I tend to think it's more has to do with her pregnancy, which is why
I
they put her
agree.
on so early. Um, but her husband, he was allowed to be in the courtroom,
I
but he
saw.
was not allowed to be there for the whole time because he might be called as a witness.
Yeah.
So there were certain parts of her testimony that he was not allowed to be there for, from what I understand.
I saw him leaving and, like, the cameras on him, and I felt for him too. I really did feel I was like, "Oh my goodness, what a
Listen to
rough
that. I
way to
know.
have to testify." It's yeah, it's super can you explain, like, one of the things that I think people asked about, and I could maybe explain, I don't know if you
Mhm.
did, like, a deeper dive, but why this is a RICO racketeering case? Did you look at that? Because I can explain it a little bit.
Yeah, so the reason why it's racketeering is because he was using, because usually racketeering is for organized crime,
Right.
like crime
Yeah.
organization. So
Yeah.
it doesn't, but the reason why, from my understanding, because this is very complicated, is because he was using money from his business as a way to now I'm gonna get it all mixed up. He was using money from his business as a way to intimidate and punish people and coerce people.
Yeah. But he
Um,
was using also wasn't he also using, like, the people who worked for him? Like, they're calling
yeah, correct,
the people a
correct.
criminal enterprise. He was
That is
using
correct.
all
His
of them.
bodyguards, like, when he used to, when he would physically assault Cassie, he would have, his bodyguards take her quietly to a plastic surgeon. He would have, people, he had a whole team of people who were, yeah, pretty much taking orders, and doing what he told them to do. And actually that would even filter down to the sex workers too. And, what he would tell them they had to do. It was all coercive. There are a few things in the chat. Sorry, I just wanna look really quickly.
Oh, yeah?
Cassie's only witness number 2. She is setting up Diddy's behavior, in my opinion. I totally agree. I think there's gonna be a lot more witnesses who are going to corroborate Diddy's behavior.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Yes. 5 hours left for recross. Amy's about to go to bed, correct? Amy's bedtime, yes, okay.
No, Amy still has 5 minutes before she turns into a pumpkin.
4 minutes, but who's counting?
Okay. No.
There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, this trial is projected to last about 8 weeks. It's thought that the prosecution is going to continue their case until late May or early June. But as we know, these things are very subject to change. I also think all eyes are on this case. I told you this. I think this might be the biggest trial of our
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah.
I think
Well, of our
given,
lifetime or this second part of our lifetime? We were
sorry,
alive during OJ?
I think this is bigger than OJ. I think
No.
it's going to be. I think the amount of it almost reminds it's very similar. Well, another thing I want to mention, sorry, there's so many interesting things. R. Kelly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard that this awful part where he had one of the sex workers urinate in Cassie's mouth.
I
Um,
did. I
and
did.
so the prosecution led with that information. And a lot of commentators are saying it's because they're trying to paint Diddy like R. Kelly, like a black man who was famous and he was involved in the music industry and into urination. And it's almost like the prosecution did that strategically to line him up with R. Kelly. And I thought that was interesting. I thought it was a little far-fetched. But I
Okay.
mean, they did lead that was kind of like a real of course that's a horrific form of abuse. He did a lot of horrific things to her though. So a lot of people allegedly, I'm sorry, I don't want to get sued by P. Diddy.
We cannot get
Or
sued by
worse. Or worse.
Can't get sued, can't get
No, no,
sued.
no. So that's something interesting. But I do think the reason I think this is going to end up being so big is because of all the famous people that are involved. A lot of famous names are getting thrown around, and it's only the first few days of trial. Who knows who's going to testify in this case?
That's true. I've heard all the famous names, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this case is huge, has huge implications. Any predictions? Too early to predict
Any
anything?
predictions? I mean, I think he will definitely, he's definitely going to be, as far as like what the evidence can show as far as what's known. I think that transportation for prostitution, there seems to be a lot of evidence. So the sex trafficking part, only because that's easy to prove. Racketeering is going to be a little more difficult to prove.
It's harder, yeah. Yeah.
But I think that we will see him guilty on some charges, not others. But I also think there is so much unknown. First of all, the defense and the prosecution, it's like even more all-star teams than we saw in OJ Simpson. If
Oh
you
my
look at
gosh,
who's
yeah.
on the team, so it's like they both have something up their sleeve, and I think this is going to get really interesting.
All right. Well, I think
Well,
it's
what do you
super
think?
interesting.
What do
No,
you think?
I believe if I have to make it's probably too early to make predictions, so, I'm sure I could be very wrong, but I think there's gonna be guilty counts, but I don't think
Mhm.
it'll be a straight guilty count, like you said. So I
And I
think
think
there's some
oh,
overreaching, and then there's
mhm.
some, I think, evidence that's going to substantiate some of the claims, so
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see him charged in state court as well for some of
No,
the
yeah, no, I definitely think that's gonna happen too. I think
yeah.
this is like a double, like yeah, there's a strategy here, like, "Oh, we're
Mhm.
not gonna charge him with this. It's a state crime," but guess what? Once that goes there, there's no
There's so much evidence,
yeah,
to support some state charges that I couldn't imagine that they don't do it.
yeah.
Unless he gets sentenced to, like, a life sentence and they're just like, "What's the point?"
No, but
Even then
remember, still people, 'cause, there are cases where, like, someone goes and I just covered one, like, what's the point? That person was already serving life. Well, the point is, what if the appeal works? Gotta have a backup plan, right?
mhm. Yep, that's true.
Alright, so are you gonna just keep covering I know we're going in 1 minute. Are you just gonna keep covering Diddy? Like, can we just keep covering this? Because it really is,
I
like
mean, I think if we can if we can
do it
muster
earlier?
up the energy if we can muster up the energy, I know we both had a very, very long day, and we have
Oh
long days
god.
tomorrow. I think we should, like there's too much going on right now in, true crime that we might have to there's no promises for how often we're
No.
gonna do it, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep keep an eye on it, and if we have time,
Yeah.
we'll talk about it.
We should,
Happy hour.
also at a future date, if we are gonna talk about it, I think we should probably talk a little bit, like, about our wheelhouse, a little criminology, like sexual
Yeah.
predators and some of the reasons how this happens and why
Mhm.
this happens. But anyway, thanks, Amy, for
Thank you, Megan, and thank you for anyone who joined us tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
We
weird to
posted
not
a little
see
bit
people.
late. Oh, yeah. Sorry, we posted an announcement a little bit late, but anyone who missed it will be able to catch it, like, in a day or 2, so
Yeah, yeah.
cool. Alright, go to
Alright.
bed. I'll miss you. I'll see you tomorrow, but I'll call you
Alright,
first thing in the morning.
I'll talk to you in 5 minutes. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thank
Night.
you.
Thanks.
Have a good night.